One of the reasons, the primary reason I agreed to speak this evening is because, with all great respect to the organization, to Mrs. Weisner, and all the beautiful things you do, is, as was mentioned, my claim to fame is the years I sat at the feet of the Rebbe. And every year, coming closer to Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe would speak for the women once, 3 times every year, and this was one of them. The other 2 are around Shavuos time. So it seems appropriate, since what I'm going to be saying is not my own words, but coming from the Rebbe's teachings, that it's fitting before Rosh Hashanah, New Year. Now, why did the Rebbe speak to women right before Rosh Hashanah? Why not before Pesach or other times? So we never got a clear answer, but we do know there's the story that the Rebbe's, right before Rosh Hashanah, actually, on Erev Rosh Hashanah, before the holiday began, before the New Year began, would always go into their Rebbetzin and speak to them. Now we know they spoke to them throughout the year, obviously, but this was made special emphasis. And the Rebbe explained the reason was because Rosh Hashanah, in the language of Kabbalah and Chassidus, is called Binyan HaMalchus. Binyan HaMalchus. In simple English, it means the construct and the building of dignity, and specifically the dignity of the woman. Kfuda Bas Melech Prima, the dignity of the woman, is compared to Malchus. So if you look at the spiritual root of a man, of the male, of masculine energy, that's what's called in Chassidus Kabbalah Zoh, Zohar Ampin. And Malchus is the spiritual root of the feminine energy. And since Rosh Hashanah is the rebuilding of a new world, because we know right before Rosh Hashanah begins, the entire world goes into a spiritual slumber, like a comatose state, only to be renewed again when we blow shofar or during the prayers throughout the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. That is Binyan HaMalchus. And actually the 10 days that follow, which is Aseret Yemei Tshuva, is the building of each one of the 10 spheres of Malchus, from Chochmah to Malchus of Malchus, concluding with Yom Kippur. So essentially the creation and recreation of the world is a feminine thing. The Rabbeim went in to Malchus to greet them, which was the best way to prepare for building a new world. So of course, being a man, not that I feel in any way discriminated against, the question is, what about the men? Do they have any role in this, And do they do nothing in creating the world and recreating it, especially the Rebbes? So I want to address that context. Now, recently I saw some books on the bestseller list. One was called The End of Men, and the other one was called Who Needs Men? Essentially the same theme. I'm sure some of you maybe actually agree with that title. Do you? Anybody?
Terrible.
Terrible, right? Okay, good.
Very pro-men.
Yeah. Yeah. So, begin with a story to address this point, which I heard from a couple, a shluchim couple. They were by the Rebbe in Yechidus many years ago. And as usual, the Rebbe would interview people who came to him, especially people who were involved in askanis and shlichus and working in the public sphere. After the shliach reported on his activities, so the Rebbe turned to his wife and said, "And what about you? You're a partner, an equal partner with your husband in this work, in this holy work. So how are you involved, and what are you doing and contributing?" And she gave him some of the things the classes she was doing, the different events she was preparing, and so on. And then she just felt very comfortable. The Rebbe was like our father. He could talk openly, off the record. So she suddenly said to the Rebbe, since we're already on the topic and the Rebbe called me a partner, I don't always feel that I'm like an equal partner. Not due to my husband, actually. It's due to the people that come, let's say, on a Friday night, and I labor and toil all day to make a beautiful Friday night dinner. And my husband, of course, is the one that gets all the accolades and all the compliments. He sits at the head of the table. And though they thank me, but I'm like, they look at me like an adjunct, as some type of add-on. So I don't always feel like I'm a partner. So the Rebbe said, that's what she tells the Rebbe. And the Rebbe smiled and he responded the following. He said as follows. He says, there's no question that they should be appreciating you. As a matter of fact, your role is even more important than your husband's in many ways. But this is the nature of the superficial world in which we live. And that is that people don't appreciate the essential foundations of things. They value the surface. And the Rebbe gave an example. He says, when someone comes into a house, it's a beautiful home, what do they compliment? They compliment beautiful paintings on the wall, the furniture, maybe the meal. But you never hear anyone ever say, oh, wow, what kind of powerful foundation this building must be standing on. Because without it, the whole building wouldn't stand. You never hear anyone say that. And as a matter of fact, nobody even looks at the foundation. Nobody even sees it. It's invisible. The Rebbe said again, you deserve all the compliments, but no, people look at the surface. A woman is akeres habayis, is the foundation. And just like they don't appreciate foundations, sometimes they may not know how to express that appreciation. The Rebbe said clearly, I'm not defending it, I'm just telling you that's the way it is. I thought it's a tremendous way of understanding Rosh Hashanah, the building of the world, and of course throughout the year, and the role of the woman. But as I said, there's a partnership going on. Men are also part of it. And the way Chassidus explains this, put it in simple English, is, and I'm taking this from a very powerful, beautiful sikh. If you've never learned it, or studied it, or read it, you should definitely check it out. It's actually the last sikha the Rebbe spoke to us until now on Chav Bei Shvat, the yahrzeit of his beloved Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. So Chav Bei Shvat, Tovshin Nun Beis, 1992, the Rebbe spoke a whole sikha, began actually with the word Chav Beis, is the word B'cha, same letter as B'cha, Yivarach Yisrael, that through you, with you, all of Israel is blessed. And spoke about this Chav Bei Shvat, that day, that even the number of the day in the month also indicates the power of the Rebbetzin. I'm not going to review the whole sikh, I just want to go close to the end, where the Rebbe speaks about the name of the Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka. And in a rare way, the Rebbe analyzes her name. Rare meaning the Rebbe never spoke openly so much about the Rebbetzin. It was another one of the private things that most of us didn't know about much. And he said the two words, Chaya and Mushka, both indicate on the role, the essential role of the woman. Chaya means life, vitality, chayas, pnimius. And Mushka comes from the word muscat. It's one of the Yud Aleph, one of the 11 spices that were in the Ketores in the Beis HaMikdash. It's a perfume. Mushka in Yiddish comes from Mushka, Mushak. The Rebbe has all the footnotes there that explain the sources for that. So it's a beautiful fragrance. And how does that relate to our role in this life? So it says, we all know, fundamental principle, why did God create the universe? Why are we here in the first place? All of us, man and woman. We're here to make, because Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu Liyis Leis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim. God desired to have a home, a dwelling place in this lowest of worlds, in this materialistic world that can be so often hostile, selfish, narcissistic, that in that, precisely that world that is not divine at the outset, should be transformed into a home where God is comfortable. Like Chassidus says, when you're at home, you don't have your masks on, you don't have all your different faces, the masquerades and everything we have to do in our armor and our defense mechanisms and everything else to maneuver our lives in the world around us. You come home, I'm talking about a healthy home, obviously. You can kick off your shoes and be yourself, completely comfortable. That's how children should grow up in such homes. That is the place where they can be their most natural. They don't have to defend themselves. They don't have to explain themselves. They can just be. And that's the homes we want to build. That's what a healthy marriage is about. The criteria is very straightforward. The tranquility, serenity of a home, where children go to sleep and they know they're calm in the home. They're secure. They know what's coming next in the morning, the regimens and so on and so forth. So the personal home we build is a microcosm of the general purpose of existence, which is a home for God. Interesting, dira. Dira b'tachteim. It doesn't just say place to hang out, a place, a dira. So in building a dira, the Rebbe says in this sikha, there are two components. How do you build a home in a hostile world? Let's talk even on a physical level. There was once upon a time where most of civilized world today was a wilderness. I am a type of history buff, so I do research. Crown Heights was once a place called Crow Hill, and that was because there was a battle during the Revolutionary War. Why? Because the crows, which are birds, you see the streets like Kingston are a little like a hill. There was a hill, and there were a lot of crows here. Now, before humans were here, what do you think was roaming in these streets here on Kingston Avenue and Eastern Parkway and Crown Street and so on? They didn't have these names. These are all man-made institutions, man-made buildings and structures. So it was a wilderness. But what do human beings do in building a home? So they have to get rid of tame the elements, as they say, both the weather elements as well as wild animals and so on, create a clearing, and create a space where you can build something that you can live at peace. Because if you have wild animals or you have very severe weather and you're exposed to it, you will not have the security and the comfort of a home. But that's only step one. That's basically in the language of Torah, surmara. That's like clearing out the wasteland, the wilderness, in order to build a structure. But what does this structure look like? It could just be a cabin. It can be raw elements that are just there so you have a roof over your head and it doesn't rain in. Is that enough for a beautiful home? No. Comes step two, the Rebbe says, is the chaya and the mushka of the home. And that is the vitality. It's not just a home that protects us from the elements and from hostile forces and so on, but also it's a home that is nurturing, and a nurturing environment. And that expresses itself, number one, in chayas. There's a sense of lebendigkeit, there's a sense of vitality, something dynamic about it. You come into the home, you feel alive, you feel empowered. And the second thing is fragrance. Fragrance reflects a more ruchniistic, a type of spiritual fragrance, not just a physical fragrance. Obviously, beautiful fragrance is always important in a home, but also that type of sense of nurturing as well, that creates something more than just a dira no, a beautiful home, a nurturing home. And that is not cosmetic. That's not just an add-on. It changes everything, because the Gemara says, dira no marchiva daita shel adam, that a beautiful home expands the horizons, the mind of a person. And the same is with Adam Elyon, with Hashem. Yes, to build a home and take the physical wilderness, like they did the Mishkan. The Mishkan was built where? A temporary sanctuary in a wilderness, in a very hostile wilderness. So that was enough to a certain extent. But the world was not transformed. So the Mishkan itself was a beautiful place, but it was still more like on the defense. And the beautiful thing that's necessary to really make a machiva daita shalom, that Hashem should feel expansive, is done through the Chaim Mushka, through the woman. So the way the Gemara puts it is this way. It says a man goes out into the field and toils all day and brings home grain. And the woman takes it and threshes it and turns it into flour and then into bread that each of us can eat and be nurtured and sustained by. Second example the Gemara uses is wool. A pishtan, actually. I think it's pishtan, yeah. Which is...
Flax.
Yes, flax. So again, he toils in the fields because it's under the hot sun. It's hard work. But all he can do is bring home the raw flax. And the woman takes it and makes it into beautiful garments. And if you look at the nature of the man and the woman, you'll see physically, just physically, biologically, physiologically, a man has brute strength. He's usually stronger. So he can work harder. And the woman has the capacity to turn into something that is refined. Now, this doesn't mean the man can't be refined and the woman doesn't have the capacity to also tame elements, but it means primarily, what is their so-called archetype? What is their primary contribution? It's that. Unfortunately, we live in a world that all these roles have been distorted, both male and female, and it's a major crisis, identity crisis. But thank God we have a Torah. And the Torah does not say we have to respond to the identity crisis issue by adjusting or accommodating or compromising. All we have to do is go back to the original message. The original Torah made it very clear. God created a human being in the divine image, and the human being is neither male nor female, it's both. Zachar nekeva bara esam. And then he separated the two because he wanted them to join together and create that union, and then create a dira b'tachtein. Pru revu milu sa'aretz kivshua. What's kivshua? To conquer, to tame the elements. I haven't seen a source for this, but it's very interesting. Even though a woman can make kiddush and a man can light candles, but primarily, when you have the choice, the man makes kiddush before Shabbos. When Shabbos, not before Shabbos. The woman lights candles before Shabbos, and the man makes kiddush. What's kiddush? Kiddush ala yayin. Yayin is a symbol of aggression, especially red wine. Symbol of aggression, of strength, of gvura. Since a man has that type of possible aggression, so he has to tame it. He has to be mekadesh it. He has to sanctify it. And what is the role of the woman? Is to light a candle. A candle is the exact opposite. A little light dispels darkness. There's no war. The Alter Rebbe makes it very clear in Tanya. There's no battle between light and dark. Like fire and water, they are in battle. Enough fire can evaporate large bodies of water. Enough water can extinguish great fires. When it comes to light and dark, you can have a very dark room, you bring a little light, that area, the light automatically, naturally, without effortlessly. Now you may need more light because it's a very large room, but that area. So the way a woman feminine energy works is not through taming, not through battling, not through conquering. It's through revealing and introducing another dimension. I very much like the title, The Gift to Humanity, because interestingly, and people always ask the question, well, listen, if God created them male and female, so why does then the Torah say that first the male, and then God said the male can't be alone, and he's a Ezer Kenegde? Why don't they just both emerge, and that's the story? Because if you think about it, the same question is asked about the Torah. Why didn't God, the whole purpose of creation is that there should be B'shvil HaTorah, there should be a Torah, that should be our mandate and blueprint how to live our lives. So why was the Torah not given to Adam and Chava? Why did it take 26 generations? Exactly 1,948 years till the Torah was given. Because the Torah is greater than the universe. The Torah is compared to Akala. The Jewish people are compared to the Chassid. What's the Torah? The Torah is the woman because she comes and tells us how to transform the world and turn it into a godly place. So first you need to deal with the hostile elements before you create beauty. If you don't have a home, the bare elements of a home, and there's a wilderness out there, you can't come in and bring in a chaya and a mushka. So the order has to be, first you have to bring the grain from the field, and then you turn it into bread. It doesn't work the other way around. And again, with the qualification that both are necessary and both have both elements. We're talking about primary archetypal roles. So when you think of it this way, in a way, a woman is a gift to humanity, even though a man is as well a gift, but a greater gift because in this world, just to be able to conquer wildernesses and to fight wars and to just have a certain element of protection does not really capture the potential, the enormous potential of what we human beings are capable of, and that is to bring the beauty of godliness into this world. And in that sense, you can say that it's an extra gift that doesn't come immediately. It comes, you do your part. You do 26 generations, prepare the ground, and then Hashem says, I give you my most precious princess, called the Torah. It reminds me that there is, recently they released a volume of the Frierdiker Rebbe's letters, volume 15. And it's unique, it's different than all other letters of the Rebbe because of the Frierdiker Rebbe, because these letters the Rebbe wrote to the Rebbetzin and to the Rebbe alone. So it's very personal. As a matter of fact, there's no controversy whether they should publish it even. So it's a very different type of volume, very, very personal. I want to share one thing with you. So you know, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, after they got married in Tafresh Pei Tes, 1928, the end of 28, Yudal Kislev, so they moved pretty much right close after that, first to Berlin, and then they ended up in Paris, France. So the way the Frierdiker Rebbe, they did travel back and forth, but not so often. Frierdiker Rebbe wrote many letters to them, unbelievable letters. But I want to share one. The Rebbe writes, Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe. And this is a letter he's writing, his love for them, and as I said, very personal. Then at the end of the letter, the Rebbe writes, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, I think the letter is dated sometime in Elul. So it'll be around this period in time, maybe a little earlier. I think Elul. And Frierdiker Rebbe says to the Rebbe, writes, says, I hope you appreciate the beautiful Even Tev, the beautiful jewel, the precious stone that God blessed you with. And that's it. The letter concludes. I think Tavis, which is like maybe 3 months later, Frierdiker Rebbe writes to the Rebbe again and says, I hope you understood what I meant by the precious stone. The Rebbe writes back that I don't know what the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe means. I don't know what Meshver means. The Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe also writes to the Rebbe there, why don't I hear more from you all? I keep writing, I don't hear letters in return. And the Rebbe writes, interestingly, I guess it's half humorously, he writes to Frierdiker Rebbe, I don't want to bother the Rebbe with all the things going on in my life that are really not that very relevant. I mean, that's the Rebbe's humility. Anyway, and the Rebbe says, but the Even Tev you write about, this precious stone, I'm not sure what the Rebbe means. Now, whether the Rebbe knew or didn't know, that's what he writes. Then comes the final third letter in this series. As I said, almost a period from Elul. And what is the letter dated? Chav Hei Adar, Tafresh Tzadik Gimel, I think it is. I may be off by a year. Should be like 1933. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says that today is the birthday of my dear daughter, Mushka. And then he says to the Rebbe, in the end of the letter, he says, and the Even Tev I was talking about was no one else but her. That was her. Now, when I say it, I know you could have probably guessed it, but when you read it, you don't, because you see Even Tev, what does it mean? It can mean anything. The Rebbe's mind, the Rebbe's knowing Chassidus, the Rebbe's whatever it may be. So every line, every word said by the Rebbes are not just nice, cute statements. It teaches us deep lessons, and teaches us that every woman is exactly that, is a Bas Melech, and is a Even Tev. And the Rebbetzin, of course, epitomized that. And it's interesting, the Frierdiker Rebbe is emphasizing it to the Rebbe. It sounds very human almost, which is good to know that the Rebbeim are not just angels, and there's a human side to it, and we can learn lessons from it. But I think it fits very well into the general theme of understanding how Chassidus explains male-female personalities in the context that two different roles. Now, to be honest, most of the roles of men and women are very similar. But the few differences is enough to make us different. This one's a man, this one's a woman. So I'm honored to stand here and share some of these words as we go to Rosh Hashanah, Binyan HaMalchus. And I totally agree, these are things that you probably have heard already or know it in your gut. Regardless, sometimes you need to articulate it, and I always say the greatest compliment, I find the greatest compliment is when someone tells you everything you said, I already knew. Because that means it resonates. It means it's deeper truths. And being that we're all trying to prepare for the new year, Tafshin Pei, and living in the spirit of entering a new year, in the spirit of what the Rebbe would want of us, So we can't figure out what the Rebbe would say if he was speaking this year to you before Rosh Hashanah. But some of what I shared, this comes from the Rebbe's different sikhs as I cited. And I want to conclude with giving you all a bracha, Birchas Hedjit, coming just from I guess I don't call inferior man, because you may be insulted, but from the other side of the gender, the other side of the mechitza, let's put it that way. That says, as the Rebbe would say, they should all have a ksiv v'chsimateva, and starting begashmius and then beruchnius, which means health and abundance in every possible way. Those have to find shidduchim. Should find that shidduch, because besides your own personal fulfillment and happiness, it's also fulfilling God's kavanah. As I said, that's how we build the dir b'tachtenim, the partnership, and should all be in good health. And those already have found their soulmates, to learn to appreciate it in deeper levels. It's always a work in progress. Nothing should be ever taken for granted. And as we approach this new binyan hamalchus, because every Rosh Hashanah is, like the Alter Rebbe says, a chadash. A new energy enters into existence that never, unprecedented, that never was and never will be. It's a tremendous thought if you think about it. So it's not just another Rosh Hashanah, even though for many of us, we're just going through the motions. But when you learn this Tanya and get a Sekeder, Simin Yudalad, it teaches us something. How do we hook in? How do we plug in to this renewal? Because at the end of the day, most problems in life is because we don't feel renewed. We don't feel that vitality. Things get boring, monotonous, and things become like by rote, mechanical. When you have that type of vitality, and anyone that saw the Rebbe, and all of us who witnessed it, was like a source of mechaya chayim, constant life, unbelievable force of life. That is the best offense. The best defense is offense. The best way to create healthy marriages, healthy homes, healthy families, is when it's dynamic. When children are bored, they say, I come to Shabbos table, I'm bored. Or I come to Rosh Hashanah, I don't know what to do in shul. These are all, it doesn't sound very threatening, but the truth is, all problems begin with boredom. Because when you're bored, then you have a vacuum. And when there's a vacuum, it's looking for excitement. And why would a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 10-year-old want to do something that's not exciting when they can do something that's exciting? And what that's exciting may not always be the healthiest things. So our job is to be a chayim mushka in the fullest sense of the word, and bring vitality and chayis, not just another Rosh Hashanah, but one that lives up to the new energy of this year. And work at it. You prepare for it. That's why we have Elul. You don't just fall into it. Something big is happening, you prepare for it. The more you prepare, the better you can enter into Rosh Hashanah that way, and it should be a good Gebench to Yar. And above all, a year of Geula, even before Rosh Hashanah. And the Geula is ultimately the vision of the Eibishter fulfilled in a dira b'tachtenim, in a permanent way. That this dira, that's not just a place to live, but a beautiful home, it becomes, the entire world will become that abode, that type of dwelling place. Forever and ever, we'll be reunited with the Rebbe, with all our loved ones, and it should be now, even before the new year. So good Gebench to everyone. Thank you so much.
Idea of the Frierdiker Rebbe writing about his daughter, it's so deep and personal, the Even Tova. A number of years ago, I saw a letter of the Rebbe where he writes that women are malchus, they're connected with the sphere of mastery and manifestation, and malchus is connected with the earth, and the earth is full of stones, and that's why women like stones, and their husbands should buy them for them. So he was encouraging this woman's husband to buy her jewels for a yontif. It reminded me of that letter when he was speaking. It's a very special time for me to speak here, because we do have a new baby in our home. It's quite remarkable, this wonder of a child that is fresh in the world. The baby weighed just about the same as what my twins weighed when they were born. There were two of them. So the last babies I had in my home were these preemie twins, and they were born at 28 weeks. So it's just remarkable, and it's connected to some of what I want to speak about, this transition of the soul into this world and how a mother helps that happen. But I want to begin by reading a poem, and maybe I'll be critiqued for bringing a poem instead of a medrash or a pasuk tehillim azoi. T.S. Eliot is one of my favorite poets, and Donald Winnicott is one of the most impactful therapists on my work. This is from the cover page of his book, Home is Where We Start From. It's a poem by T.S. Eliot, and it's so connected to having this little infant in our home. Home is where one starts from. As we grow older, the world becomes stranger, the pattern more complicated of dead and living. Not the intense moment isolated, with no before and after, but a lifetime burning in every moment. And I think that what Eliot captures is this idea that there's one beginning. I once spoke to a shlucha. I was speaking for her, and we were just speaking about choices she made, and she said, my one regret is that you only get to be new in town once. You can't, next year, there's only one beginning. Although, of course, every moment is a beginning, but that inception where it's just this moment and there isn't a history. From a Torah perspective, of course, it's more subtle and complex because your soul exists before your birth. It's just incarnating into the body, and it's taken a journey into this world. But what I want to focus on tonight is the role of the home and the role of woman in socializing individuals who feel like it's not happening. I see clients, whether it's the teenager and the mom's in the house, but she's not at home, she's not available, and she's not present, and people feeling isolated because they're not connecting with others, and so they're not connecting with their own selves. And that's the gift to humanity that a woman is. We are the ones who gift others with becoming who they are. Actually, while Rabbi Jacobson was speaking, I was thinking of another letter. He sparked a whole lot of associations, but one of the letters that he brought to mind was from the Rabbi, where he comments on a Gemara and the Zohar. The Gemara says, "Vayis noah isha noah and kalim noim marchivim daitam shel adam." I think that's the lashon. A beautiful home, a beautiful wife, and beautiful vessels expand the consciousness of a person. And the Zohar speaks about this and correlates it with the idea of a body, a soul, and the organs in the body. How these also expand the consciousness and correlate with each other. But the interesting thing that the Rebbe brings out over there is that the mamutza, the intermediary between the home and the vessels, or the body and the organs of the body, is the woman. The woman is the catalyst, the means through which society, the world, becomes tame. Like Simon was saying, a man can bring wheat, gather the sparks from the wild side, but to really domesticate something so that we can tame our inner wildness and engage with each other and connect with each other, that requires a woman. So I think that many of us are familiar with the Maharal, where he speaks about Shasani Kirtsoinai, and many people have, like a minor fit about the bracha, "Thank you for not making me a woman." But when you look in the Gemara, there's clear understanding of what's happening over there, and that we're putting ourselves on the map of mitzvahs in the morning, brachas. What is incumbent upon me? What am I obligated to do? And yet those blessings, "Thank you for not making me a slave," aren't stated in the "Thank you for not making me a woman," etc., are not stated in the positive, because to say "I am that, I embody that" is very difficult. But the woman's bracha is the only one which is stated in the positive. Shasani kirtsoine, "Thank you, God, blessed are you, God, for making me according to your will. And the Maharal says that God kept on going until he got to woman, and then he stopped. I mean, if there was a higher level of perfection, he would have gone on. There would have been, not Sheshis, you may Bereshis, like 10 days of creation rather than 6 days. Okay, we hit the jackpot. Day 10, we got it. We've got this being, and now I can stop. But once he created the woman, he stopped, and that was the initial intention that he had. Right? So if the last thing indeed is the first in thought. And so what God was thinking of creating was a man and a woman, and the woman comes out of him. So when we talk about this, I think, but I feel that culturally today, we are not appreciating who a woman is. If you think about a soul's journey, it starts in the supernal womb. That the soul has to drip out mazal, right? Luck, supernal luck. It's from the word nozel, to drip. The Rebbe says it's where the soul drips into being out of God, almost like a seminal drop, right? And then there is this inception in the womb of the Shekhinah. And then for 9 months, the soul travels down into this world, and it is contained in the uterus of a woman. And then when that baby is born, I've given birth, but I haven't been at births. It's quite remarkable to see a little person come into this world. And, we're coming to Chai Elul, the beautiful Sikh of the Rebbe, where he says, if you look at what's happening in the abortion debate, Torah addresses it, because there's this idea of feasibility or viability. The child can't live alone, so it's not really a life. But on the other hand, according to Torah, life begins at conception. So which is it? And a fascinating Sikh on Chai Elul in Chelik Chof Daled, if you're interested, you can find it there. I'm going to be teaching it on Thursday. Anyone's welcome to ask me about it afterwards. But you see that there is this transition from a state of being where you're completely dependent upon the mother, and then you become your own person. I cut the cord. I mean, that cord is solid. It is hard. And cut that cord, it's like, the belly button is fascinating. Your belly button is the place at which you became an independent person. But it is also the point, that whole notion of contemplating the navel that's in Buddhism, Lahavdil, is there in Eov, right? Because that's where you're connected to your mother, and she was to her mother, and she was to her mother. The belly button is like the source of life, and it closes. And then what? Now you're in the world. You left that earthly womb. And where are you? You are in your mother's home, in your mother's arm. And she becomes the container of the individual, so that you can, if she did a good enough job, Winnicott says you don't have to be an outstanding mom, you don't have to be very good, you don't even have to be good, you just have to be good enough. The bar is pretty low because people are resilient. You can get by with very little. But I'll tell you one of the things that aches me, ladies. I watch a young woman nursing their babies, and they're on their cell phones. Now, God made a perfect distance. The perfect distance for an infant to focus is from the nipple to your eyes. The most recognizable object shapes to an infant is 2 circles and a line, because that's your eyes and the nose. Meaning the baby is primed to bond with the mother. We need to connect. And then what? You're holding that baby and on the cell phone. Where is that eye contact? And maybe you don't notice it now, but when that kid's 15, believe me, you'll notice it. When the kid's 20, when your kid has a kid, all of that. Good enough means appreciating the gift that we are. That a woman is a container and a woman is a connector. The woman provides intimacy. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book You Just Don't Understand by Deborah Tannen. She's a social linguist. Fascinating book. And, the Gemara says that Hashem created 10 portions of speech. Woman took 9, and men took 1. I think that scientists say women use 6 words to every one that a man does. So if he says it in 10 words, she said it in 60 words, kind of thing. But Deborah Tannen is a sociolinguist, and she speaks about genderlects, not dialects, but genderlects, and how men and women use language differently. And one of the things she says is that men use language in a way that is controlling. Do this, do that, come here, go there. And women use language to connect. Let's go out to dinner. And then he thinks she's making a suggestion, but she was saying, take me out to dinner, right? So then when he doesn't respond because he thought it was a suggestion and he thought, let's not, she gets really upset. But the woman is the connector, intimate, even little girls. I don't care what people say out in the world. Women and men, most of what goes on with us, we have in common. But there's a very significant portion of who we are that is different. And this idea of intimacy, called kvuda bas melech pnima, the glory of the woman is her inwardness. Not just that she's inside, but that she relates to the inner world of other people. There's a certain emotional intelligence, and that is a gift. We have to give that to each other. We have to be giving each other eye contact. We have to be giving each other our own voice. You can listen according to some halachic authorities. I'm not paskaning here, and I know that it is not an ideal, but there are authorities who say a man can listen to a woman's voice if it's a recording, but not to the actual voice. There's something very intimate. There is a vibration, there is energy, and I feel that we're losing that. In order to truly be happy, we need the bonding and the attachment and the intimacy that women provide, the containment that they provide. It's time for us to go back to that. There's interesting research out, because so much of my work is in the arena of addiction. Unfortunately, men addicted to pornography, but even women. New research explains addiction as attachment disorder. That what happens is that the infant is not attaching properly to the parent, and then what they're looking for later in life is a substitute for that attachment. And that's very understandable when you look at the gematria for the words love and one in Hebrew, because love, ahava, is the same gematria as echad, one. All of our loving is a yearning to bond and to become united. So the baby is rooting, and then it latches on and it's nursing. And so much of what we're doing is trying to recreate that in our lives, in our marriages and with our children and with our friends. And if we don't step back from cultural norms and messages, we're just going to be losing more and more of that. I believe that the greatest protection against big government and big money are the walls of our home. And that when you walk into your home, it's like walking into the Beis HaMikdash. I think of the Beis HaMikdash as an embassy. If you walk into the Israeli embassy here in New York or the French embassy, as soon as you cross the threshold, there's no longer the laws of America or New York federal law. When you walked into the Beis HaMikdash, it's Hashem's laws apply. And your home has to function like an embassy. You come into the home, the house is a place where you have permission to be. I think that's what Rabbi Jacobson was saying earlier. Why do we speak about a dira b'tachtonim? Because everywhere I go, I'm there. Like God is everywhere in the world. But where am I most me? In my home. When I come in my home, I am not wearing this sheitel. I'm wearing my tichel. I don't uncover my hair. but I'm wearing my tichel. And I am comfortable to be me. Look, one of the nice things about turning 50 is that you get more comfortable with being yourself. It's like, okay, you don't like it, go find someone else. You know, there are lots of people in the world, and across the street when you see me, it's okay, I'm 50 years old, I've done my time, and I'm not going to live my life to make you happy. I will live my life to try and make God happy, and I hope that that pleases you too. But when you come into your own home, you have to be able to be who you are. And your children and your husband have to be able to be their truest and best selves. And I tell you, there are many people who are hell-bent on making a hell of a lot of money off of all of us. Because if they can, I mean, just look at what's happening with Google. It's not such a simple company, right? Where you're controlling people's minds. It's amazing. I go to South Africa and all of a sudden I have ads about insurance companies in Johannesburg. It's like, how the heck did Google know? You know, it's got my location device, and then I turn that off, and then I have a conversation with someone about something, and there it is. Now, there is a lot of money to be made by knowing how your mind operates and manipulating it. And if you want to stay free and you want to keep your loved ones free, there has to be really secure and deep attachment with another person. The walls of our home are the best protection between big government and big money, both of which there should be abundant money for everyone, but you know, when it's really big, like Google's got a bigger budget than, I think the budget of Brooklyn is bigger than any country in Africa. So like it gives you a little bit of a sense, you know, that it's like when there's that much, what freedoms are being lost. And I think that women are standing at the very epicenter of freedom for the next generation, of bonding, of connection, of being real, of being able to look inside and know ourselves. And unfortunately, one of the things that has taken hold, I think, cultural Marxism, puts career ahead of connection. To me, it's the equivalent of throwing all the babies into the Nile. I see women, and look, ladies, and anyone who's online, I am not saying don't work. I myself had to work. And it disturbs me very deeply that there aren't vouchers in this country for private education. Like, what do you care? What you want to be in my breakfast, and you want to be in my kishkas, and you want to be in my children's education. That's not good. That's not good. But so we have to work. And I think that having to pay for private education is very problematic. Most people in our community, most couples, need to work. So I'm not saying don't do that, but what bothers me is that the career becomes the badge. You know, my husband used to make a joke. He says in Russia, where he grew up, people used to joke about Brezhnev. He had a very big chest. They said he had plastic surgery to enlarge his chest because there wasn't enough room for the medals. It's like, are we looking to careers for medals? While you were speaking about the Rebbe's answer to this woman in the home about the foundation, when she was saying, you know, people take note of my husband, but not me. A young shlucha came to me, such a wonderful person. I mean, like, you know, the kind of person where if there were more homes like the one she runs, the world would be full of so much more peace and resonance and joy. And she says to me, we have this Chabad house, and, you know, my husband introduces himself as the director, and then, like, what do I say? And I said to her, well, why don't you just tell them that, you know, what I did over the last 5 or 6 hours to prepare this meal for you and to be here for you, I do for my family 24/7. She was like, yes, that's my line. You know, but what, we have to put it into a career? Like Rabbi Friedman speaks about the fact that people told him he's so remarkable, and what does his wife do? And he said she runs a home for unwanted children. And oh, what does she do? And she takes care of their emotional needs, and she actually educates them, and she does their laundry, and she cooks for them and feeds and does the budgeting, and they're like amazing. She runs this home like one-stop shop, and it's just her. And she says, yes, they're all our children, and no one else wants them, right? So we're going to wrap it up. We're going to put a badge on ourselves and say, oh, okay, now I have a career. Capitalism values wealth and communism values labor. It's like, it's not such a big deal. I mean, yes, Adam la'amal yulad, a person is born to work, but your mission, your purpose, your sparks are in your work. And there's so many sparks in being the woman that is creating containment and connection and intimacy for the world. I want to share one last idea before I close, and that has to do with the impact of the pull on our lives. And, there's an expression in 12-step programs, take what you like and leave the rest. So if this doesn't apply to you, it doesn't, like any of the stuff that I'm talking about, if it's irrelevant, then, I'm sorry. I hope maybe you know someone that it applies to. But it struck me when 9/11 happened, I was astonished because 9/11 was 2011. And I remember when Russia invaded Afghanistan, 2001, sorry, right. I remember when Russia invaded Afghanistan in 1989. I lived in South Africa. There was $3 to the rand. There's now like 15 rand to the dollar. Gold skyrocketed. It was a big deal. And in some ways with bin Laden, I understood it was the same war. I mean, it was exactly the same thing. But there was the period of time between 1989, which was a big year in my life, and 9/11 was pretty much the same period of time as between the end of World War II and when I was born. And at that moment, I realized how closely I was born to the end of the war. To me, I learned about World War I and World War II in history books. It was far away. Suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, I'm really like close to that. And looking back at my life, I see things that I took totally for granted that had their inception around the time that I was born. And one of them is the pill, where I think that the impact of the pill is one of the most game-changing things that has happened for humanity. I remember being at Beis Rivka in the seminary office and speaking to Mrs. Groner, and she said such an interesting thing. She said, in Russia, in Uzbekistan, when we used to go to school, when I was a child, you went on a donkey, and people cooked in brick ovens, and life was pretty much similar to what Avram Avinu had. The world has changed in the last 100 years more than it did in thousands and thousands of years prior to that. What happened as a result of the pill, I believe, has impacted the value that we place on women and on womanhood and our contribution. Because what the pill did is it separated, and it's a really recent experiment that I believe the Me Too movement is only trying to come to terms with. It's created havoc. The pill separated sexual intimacy with procreation. So you could have sex but not babies. And as a result, two things happened. Women could engage, I don't want to use the word intimately, because it wasn't necessarily intimate. Now it was just sex, right? It was a physical act. They could do that and not have babies, or they were married and could not have babies and pursue their careers, so they became financially independent. And it also separated out having children from marriage. Before the pill, marriage and children were very, very connected. And as a result of separating out marriage and children, gay marriage could become a thing. But without the pill, that would never have happened. And I think that conservative women, whether we're speaking about Yidden or other conservative women, more Christian groups and people who are saying, look, we don't have premarital relations, etc., they have struggled with the promiscuity that came about from the pill. But I think that the left and the Me Too movement is struggling just as much with that. It's like they're trying to set boundaries that are not natural boundaries because there have to be boundaries. You know, it's like mikveh are the waters that keep the fires burning, and kedusha is from the word akud eish, a consecrated or dedicated fire. If you don't put boundaries around the fire, it's going to consume you. But if you do, if you put those beautiful boundaries of water around the fire and the passion of intimacy, then there will be something holy. And I think that the left and the whole Me Too movement is struggling to find a way for women to have their dignity and be respected with all the freedom that came about, freedom quote unquote, from the pill. Anyway, what does that have to do with us? I believe my sense is that this has profoundly impacted not just the stability, but the value of the nuclear family. And really, the nuclear family, if you want to control people, you knock out the Eibishter, you knock out God, and you knock out mom and dad. I mean, you have to have fathers. That's why I said when Rabbi Jacobson was speaking at the beginning, I totally all for men. To say, oh, woman, yeah, we're the best, as if the guys are, no. Like what, you're going to walk with only a right foot or only left? You need left and right. You need male and female. So I want to end with a brocha. You know, the idea of alpha and beta, the alpha male, is from the word aluf, aleph. It's from the word aluf, a general, you know, or a master, alufo shel olam, the master of the universe. So the idea of the male certainly has the connotation of strength. And beta, the beta type personality is bayit, which is the home, which is the female, and that inwardness and the connectedness. Of course, the Rebbe always spoke when it came to Shnas Hakel about the fact that we all have male, female, and child within ourselves. But I think that we can really do with much more celebrating of our unique roles. When people say they want unity, what I'm hearing more and more is pressing for uniformity. No, I don't want uniformity. I want unity. Men to be men and women to be women, children, children, and adults, adults. We're not all children, and we're not all genderless. And we can celebrate my home and your home, and together all of our homes create Klal Yisrael, which build the entire world. There's a beautiful story of the Baal Shem Tov who says that when he came into the world, he came in with a soul equal in greatness to his own. And they made a pact on the way in that they would not cry at childbirth. And the Baal Shem Tov once revealed, this neshama kept the deal and didn't cry, but I cried. And for that, he was blessed with anonymity and I was condemned to fame. It's such a Jewish story. And I think that we live in a world that looks at fame and the outside, what's happening in Reshus HaRabim, the public domain, but the Reshus HaYochid, the private domain, the female domain, is one that is very neglected. And may we take this month to rededicate ourselves to our own inner world and to our own homes, celebrating what is private and personal and not necessarily the public persona. The people you know on Facebook don't really exist. No one's life is like that, right? And with that, we should make the entire world the private domain of Hashem with the coming of Mashiach now.
Thank you, Mrs. Tzukernik. Everything you said definitely resonated and was relevant. There's no question about it. So everything that we heard tonight, there's a lot of inspiration. Obviously, it's not always easy. So that's where the questions come in. So if a woman works and makes money, does this infringe on the total amount Hashem decides the couple will make on Rosh Hashanah? Meaning, will my husband make less if I'm also earning? Basically, I really want to raise my kids and be home with my babies. Will we be poor because of this?
I would say the following. First of all, we don't know what God's plan is for us. Maybe He wants us to be wealthy. So if He wants us to be wealthy, we have to make the keli, the container, and it could be that may require not just the husband working, but also the wife working to some extent. On the other hand, Chassidus does say that God designates how much parnasa we'll have, and as much effort as you'll put in, it's not going to be more than what Hashem wants you to have. But the problem is we don't know what that amount is. Mm-hmm. That would have been nice if God said, no matter what you do, you're not going to make more than $100,000 a year. That's too low. Let's say $300,000 a year. The problem is we don't know. So therefore, that's why God blessed us with seichel, with intelligence, with emotions, with the ability to go to a mentor, an objective person to speak, because it's really case by case. Generally speaking, listen, we all believe, we all agree that the best case scenario of the man can earn enough to have not just the minimum, but just some type of at least some comfort for the whole family, and the wife doesn't have to work and she's happy with that. That would be optimal. But we live in a time where there are different challenges. It's not always easy to just rely on that for different reasons. Sometimes the husband's not earning enough. Sometimes even if he is earning, you need more. And again, because we don't know God's plan, I don't think you can just come up with a black and white formula to just answer this yes or no. And I think each case, you should sit and talk with someone that you trust, who can look at the circumstances, maybe they can suggest something. And at times we do need to work harder than we think we'd like to, let's be honest. It would be even better if all men didn't have to work, nor women. The problem is, what would they do all day? The men, that is. You don't want to have them home all day, trust me.
I would like to add to this. The reason I said you take it first, Simon, is because I don't know anything about what God apportions during the year. It's like theoretically, and I see people make lots of effort and not make that much money, and then some people don't make that much effort. It's a Gilgal thing. Reincarnation is connected with finances to a great extent. But I want to say two things. I remember seeing, what's her name, the CEO, Sheryl Sandberg, right? Is that from Facebook?
Yeah.
She wrote that book, Lean In. I haven't read it. But the script was, you can have anything you want. Well, I just want to say, that may be true, but you can't have everything you want. There is no ways. Like, what I see is that it's not PC. As I said, find another speaker next time if you don't like it, or don't come hear me, whatever it is, not PC. What I believe has happened is that women got to get the jobs their fathers held, and they retained the jobs their mothers had. So basically, they're out working and could have a high-profile job. But for most women, unless they're working at a very high income level, they can't afford full-time help, etc. So they're still coming home. So you've got this job and nice career, but then you come home and you're still taking care of your family, and it's exhausting. So I do think that it's very important for us to say, you might be able to have anything, which is really a lie, but using it in a generic way, like there's much more available to us than there used to be as women. And financial independence has enabled women who were abused and living in terrible situations to pick up and leave. So there's been a lot of benefit to it. But we have to remember, you can't have everything. And there are trade-offs if you're going to devote yourself to your career. And I hear this question is not about, I want a career. This person wants to look after a family and there's financial need. But even when it comes to that, like, what do you need? How much do we need? Look, it's a very, no one can answer that question. There isn't a bottom line. Like, if someone is very wealthy and loses all their money, then the community, I used to hate this idea. It like turned me against Yiddishkeit for a long time. Someone's very wealthy, loses money, and then, big millionaire, now the community has an obligation to bring him back up to that level, like Fat Papa Joe, living the rich life. Come on, I'm barely scraping by, and why should I have to work so hard so that you have, because people's well-being, they are connected. Money is very connected to much of our mission in life. And being rich or being poor, what we have, wealth is a state of mind. How much money you have, you can count, but wealth is a state of mind. So we can have everything. You might be able to have anything, but you can't have everything. That's one thing. And the other thing that I want to say is that even if you're working, statistics show that the greater the frequency a family eats together, the lower the incidence of substance abuse. The whole family without their cell phones on. So sit down to dinner. It's not beneath your dignity to make a warm dinner for your family, which unfortunately many people say that. Sarah Lieberman, Simon's sister-in-law, once said to me, we were talking, and she said, it used to be when we would have dinner, my father would call us for dinner and he would say, come and wash. Now people say, come for dinner, or maybe now they don't even say come for dinner, right? But come and wash meant, you sat down to a Suda and you washed for bread and you ate your meal. It was like a more formal thing. And then we had mazonas come in. It's like just all these boundaries moving away, and the meal loses its formality. Whatever choices you make and whatever your circumstances are, do feel that the evening meal is vital. Friday night dinner together is not enough to protect the family.
How do I love and care about my husband and be a wife in all aspects of married life when I feel like my husband gives me virtually nothing? He doesn't give me love, and he's not kind, and he's also not a provider. I know for the sake of the kids we must stay married, but I feel like I give all the love and I provide the money and he gives nothing.
I think there's two components. One is, how do you manage your own life? And the other is, what do you do in terms of the family unit? Now, maybe because of the work that I'm involved in, I'm seeing a lot of people who are in crisis mode and a lot of pain. My personal opinion is, whatever you can do to keep a marriage together, you should. It is deeply damaging to children. And not only that, I do see that women suffer a lot. Firstly, there's never as much money. So you're going to be splitting. There's double rent, or double mortgage, and double utilities, and double so many things. So everyone's going to be less well off, but also emotionally less well off. There's a beautiful explanation of the woman with the mirrors in Mitzrayim. I think it's from the Zohar. I don't know. I heard this from Rav Ginsburg, where he says that the woman would go out to meet their husbands in the fields in Mitzrayim. They were coming back from the slave labor camps, and they took these little bags of food. and they would carry their mirrors in them. And then they would take them to the trees, under the trees in the apple orchards. There were many apple orchards there, and sit down and lean against the bark and pull out their mirrors and say to their husband, who's more beautiful, you or me? And then the husbands would see their wives and become attracted to them, and they would be intimate, and that's how they conceived the children. Because their husbands were so broken from not earning a living and from being slaves. It's like, I understood that story really well after Madoff happened, I just traveled around the world and so many women telling me my husband's not interested in me, my husband's not interested, because the money and the intimacy, the man and the min, which is money and sex in Hebrew, is very connected one to the other. So I understood that story after Madoff, and what the Zohar says is that the mirror is Or Choizer, it's a reflected light, and it reflected to the husbands the root of the soul where they were one. In this world, he was him and she was herself, but the mirror reflected to him, actually in our source, we are one. And I think that what happens with divorce is that we split that parts of that unified, Rashi has a different opinion. It's in Chumash, it says, the man must leave his father and mother, he should cleave to his wife and they'll become one flesh. So Rashi says the one flesh is the child. But there's other opinions. One is that the one flesh is the couple in intimate union. So the unity is what we all want. That's the power of intimacy in any case, that it gives us an experience of that unity. But I'm speaking about it for the children. Children from divorced homes have a much more difficult time retaining a sense of wholeness because the male and female has been split. That's at the spiritual level. And then just practically, people's lives are very difficult. So when there's divorce, I would recommend to do whatever you can to stay married. I have a friend, she once said, the effort that it would take to get divorced and stay divorced, you may as well just put into your marriage. For those, and I see there's a number of women, forgive me for going on a little bit of a tangent, but I see there's a number of women in the audience who aren't married. I want to share something I read in a letter of the Frierdiker Rebbe. I have not been able to find it. And if anyone knows, I would be very happy if you would tell me. But it's in one of those letters. He writes and he says, marriage is compared to a home. The time of dating, when you're on the shidduch, is like the raw materials of your home. The period of the engagement is the foundation of the home, and then the marriage is the home itself. So marriage is very difficult. When you're dating, don't think to yourself, oh, he'll change. No, those raw materials, those are the raw materials. It's like those stories of the 3 pigs with the house of the straw and the wood and stone or bricks. I think those are the 3 Batei Mikdash, lahavdil, it like got morphed into the world. But it's like, if the guy's got straw, then that's what the house is going to have. If it's wood, it's wood. If it's stone, it's stone. Those raw materials are really important because you're going to get more than you bargained for once you get married. But once you're married, do whatever you can to stay married. And my general advice, I don't know this person, so it's in a very general way. I would say definitely find ways to nurture yourself and take care of yourself. Like, I do retreats for women, and they come, and I know it's just like a brief retreat, but it can give so much. Speaking, I once heard, I can't remember who taught me this, Chokmas Noshim Bon Sabesa, the wisdom of a woman builds her home. But actually, it says Chokmat Nashim, the wisdom of women, plural, Banta Beita, builds her home individually. And before I got married, someone said to me, you will build your home on the wisdom of many women. Speak to those women. Speak to your friends, speak to a mashpia, build your home on the wisdom of your friends as well. So I think that having a support group that is extended is really important, and even if that means financially, having access to funds that your husband doesn't necessarily know about. And that may not be PC, but I always had an envelope that had money in it. So it was, sometimes it had a significant amount and sometimes very little. Significant and little is also relative. I mean, like from 0 to 18,000. That was my range. So that when it came to my daughter's wedding, I didn't have to burden the family. And it was like, okay, I'd get paid and then just like put little bits away, etc., because it's going to cost you more than you think.
I just want to say something which I thought was obvious, but I'll say it. Being that someone has counseled many, many couples and so on, so every question is based on the premise that everything that she said is accurate. So how do we know for sure that the guy is not capable? Maybe it's her perspective.
Or that she's giving all the love.
And all these details. So the first thing is, I would tell anyone who asks such a question, you have to go talk to someone and hear, number one, maybe there's another perspective, his perspective, and maybe there's things you're not seeing. I'm not, God forbid, I'm not in any way suggesting that the woman is not expressing her authentic feelings and sincere feelings. But usually when it comes to marital issues, it's like they say there are three stories: his story, her story, and the true story. And each one has something they contribute, but they're subjective. And often that's exactly why we have a Selech Harav, that concept of a mentor, of a spiritual mentor, a mashpia, that can help perhaps shed light, that can add something. So what Shimona was saying, yes, if it's all proven to be absolutely correct, that she did everything 100% right and he's 100% wrong, yeah, there's still a case to be made to do whatever you can and nurture yourself. But I rarely seen that to be the case. There are situations like that. I'm not suggesting there are. But if you really want to make your marriage better, it's not just about how you see it. You have to be able to get another perspective, because I've heard this many times, both from women and men. They have both said independently, where a woman would say, my husband is just a loser, there's no one there. And sometimes the man says it. And they're usually wrong, because they're subjective. They may not be getting their needs met, so they're not seeing it clearly. And sometimes actually they help exacerbate the problem, because the other party doesn't feel like they have a partner that's helping them grow. But this does not try to point fingers. I'm just pointing out that the pictures are more complicated than when the person just says something doesn't always mean that's exactly the picture. There's always more to the story.
I just want to tell you a story that I once heard from my teacher, Rabbi Jacobson, in South Africa. He said the Alter Rebbe had a chassid who was very unhappily married. His wife used to embarrass him publicly, constantly. And he came to the Rebbe and he said, I want to get divorced. And the Rebbe said, no, you definitely should not get divorced. And he left, he listened to the Rebbe, and I don't remember how long went by. It was definitely more than a decade. He tried to work with what the Rebbe told him, but when he just felt at one point he could not anymore, and he came back and he said to the Rebbe, please, I beg of you, just release me from what you said and let me get divorced. And the Rebbe said to him, okay, if that's what you need, you can, but I just want to tell you that in a previous lifetime, you worshipped every avodah zarah that there was out there, and the punishment was that you would have to be incarnated many times for each time, because idolatry incurs the death penalty, and you were going to have so many lifetimes that you would go through until there was an neshama who said, isn't it true that if you embarrass someone, it's like, it's like murder? She said, I'll go down and be his wife and embarrass him just throughout the course of his life. And anyway, it's not such a comfortable story, but it does explain much about what it is that we live with. And I do think, as you were reading this story, it sounded to me like that does not sound necessarily that it's real. I think this idea of his story and her story and these stories is very wise.
It's funny, the story that Mrs. Tzukernik said, it resonates. But I just want to end very quickly, because I think everyone has to go and it's very late, just on a more positive note, that sometimes that, yes, it's difficult if the partner is not as pleasant as we view it to be, where the marriage is not as pleasant. There's a story of one of the Rebbe's, his son was going out on shidduchim, and they went on several dates and things were getting more serious. And then the Rebbe said to the son, I don't know which Rebbe it was, he said to his son, it wasn't one of the Chabad Rebbe, he said to his son, no, what's going on? Why aren't you finishing the deal? He said, because Tati, I have this terrible scar on my face, and I just don't think I can propose to her. There's no way she's going to get past the scar on my face. So the father looks at his son and he says, you're going to bring it up before you propose on the next date, and this is what you're going to tell her. You're going to tell her that in Shamayim, before you both came down, it's a famous story, you probably all know it, I see you smiling. In Shamayim, before you came down, it was said that she was going to be the one who would have to go through life with this horrible scar on her face. And for a girl, obviously, that's a lot more unpleasant than for a boy to be physically not beautiful, although it's not pleasant for either, but it's definitely more traumatic for the girl. And he said, I guess in front of the Beis Din Shel Maila, he said, I would like to take the scar. I don't want my other half that I love so dearly, I don't want her to have to experience that. So he took the scar for you already all those years back. He said, I want you to tell that to her. So obviously the date comes, and he says, he's about to propose, but he says, I know you're looking at the scar on my face, and I don't have the courage to propose. My father said I should tell you this.